Welcome back everyone to the channel. We got an interesting different type of video here today. Been doing some playtesting, and if you watched that last game with the new Skaven book that we posted up, I had some Doomflayers in there, and I think they're really good. A little hidden gem there that's kind of going missed amongst the super amount of excitement we've got from the rattling guns, just doing tons of shots. So I think these guys are kind of sneaking under the radar, and not many people were talking about them. So I'm here to convince you, highlight them, and convince you that they've got some serious play, something new that we hadn't really had in the index. So what we're going to kind of do today is look at the unit, do a little unit focus video, and kind of go through some of the reasons why I think they're a really sleeper unit that people are going to have to watch out for, and how best I think to utilize them. And then at the end I got a little sample list. So let's get right into it. So as you know, the Skaven books are separated into formations. You got 4 different ones in the current book, each focusing in on one of the clans. Ashen didn't get theirs this time, but you got the Claw Horde focusing on Verminous units, +1 rend on the charge, Fleshmail Menagerie, +1 attacks, and a 5-up ward, depending upon the role. The Virulent Procession for the Pestilence, extra pile-in, and some mortal wounds at the end of the turn. And the one we're really going to talk about today is the warpcog convocation. Everybody's been really excited about that particular formation with the rattling guns, just shooting people off the field. So what you got there is you pick 3 scryer units in your shooting phase, and you'll roll a dice. On a 2-up, you get +1 to wound. If you roll a 6, you get a supercharged version of that, and you get +1 rend in addition to it. So that brings those rattling guns to, 4s and 4s -2, 4s and 3s -2, 1 damage if you roll that 6, and then all attacking you on 3s and 3s. That's a lot of dice. But with the focus of the warpcog convocation and all the shooting units involved with that, new weapons teams and such, it kind of forces you into a certain type of play, right? You want to go heavily into shooting, take advantage of as much of that bonus as you can, and then it also kind of pushes you into a more castle style play, where you got all your clan rats, kind of streaming in here and there, and your buffing units. You usually have an arch warlock to kind of give you the new free covery fire if you're wholly within range of his ability. No CP spent, and that leaves you sometimes with little or no melee punch in the list, which means you either shoot your opponent off the field or die. Which, let's admit it, that's pretty much a Skaven way, and sometimes somebody's going to die. It may be us or you. But I think the Doomflayer has a pretty good slot, especially in this formation with a heavier shooting build, because we'll talk about those details as we look at the war scroll here. So you got a move of 2d6 +3, health 4, and a 4-up save. Don't be knocking on the 4-up save. A lot of you guys who maybe play other armies maybe look at a 4-up save and think, hey, that's not tanky. But in Skaven, 4-up saves about as tanky as it gets. So when we see that in the Skaven book, it's more useful than we tend to give it credit for. A control of 1, a little bit of a bummer here on that one, but as we'll look at the damage calculations and such, we kind of see that may not be as much of a downer as it may look. So you got 1 attack. That's the Whirling Blades. 2d6 attacks characteristics, 3s and 3s, -1, 1 damage. On the surface doesn't look like much, but when you look right here and you see there's +1 rend versus infantry. So that'll bring you up to rend 2. Then, if you're on the charge, you're getting +1 damage. So, we can start to see some of the damage really coming out of this unit. And that's all. You get 2 models for 130 points. They're War Machine and they're Scryer. So you also get a little interesting ability here for the charge phase. It's one unit, and roll a d3, 2 up, does mortals equal to the roll. So you get a little d3 mortal damage on top of there. Nice sweet little addition. Let's move on. We got some of the strengths that I've identified of the unit. You got good mobility in Skaven. Most everything is moving about 6 inches. Some of your bigger units moving about 10 inches or so. Doom wheel's pretty fast, but damage is super lackluster. So 5 inches as the minimum move if you roll 2 1s on your d6 plus the 3 is not that bad when you consider it across the rest of your army. All the way up to potential 15 inches. In the game that we posted, most of my rolls ended up being around 10. So you're going to get about a 9 on the average move, which is pretty fast for Skaven. And I would argue fast for most armies around as well. And that gives you something that we really haven't had in Skaven. We really haven't had a cavalry style unit, and this might fall in that slot. So another one of their strengths being 4 wounds each, that puts them on the same level in terms of health as Rat Ogres, also 4 wounds each, and that will allow them to better utilize any command abilities like power through at the end of a turn. So if they're being sent into infantry, the odds are they're going to out wound it, which means you will be able to activate power through and then get this unit out of combat, which is very useful. And if you look at Stormcast, their book's coming up, most of their heroes are, most of their infantry is 3 wounds and below. So this gives you that advantage, that additional retreat ability. You get your 4-up save. Once again, we talked about that. Don't be a slouch on that in the Skaven book. And then a very high potential damage. And here's the key, with no buffs. That's where they really seem to shine, in my opinion, in a warpcog convocation list. Their lack of needing buffs. So check out this damage right here. This is just stock damage, assuming they go into infantry so they get their extra rend and they're on the charge, right? No all-out attack, no additional buffs. Just unsupported, just on the charge into infantry. You're looking at 20.74 damage into a 4-up save. I mean, that's pretty good. So a reinforced unit puts you at 260 points, giving you an average points per damage 12.5 damage per point spent, which is, when you're trying to squeeze out extra out of a list, that really helps. 260 points to get you that kind of damage. You can really start to do some things with that, especially if you're leaning into the Scryer heavy shooting side of things. You're putting your all-out attacks into the rattling guns and other things. So the buffs are being layered onto them and not necessarily the Doomflayers. They can still perform quite well. So just to kind of check out an all-out attack, if you throw that in there, that'll put them on another 5 damage. So you're looking at a 25.93 average damage versus a 4-up save, which is huge. I mean, those are not rookie numbers. So to kind of look at some comparisons for damage, we're going to check out the Rat Ogres, which tend to be a staple melee hammer style unit for most lists. A lot of people really excited about them. Here they are, reinforced unit, gets you for 320 points. I gave them an extra attack from their war scroll ability, where you take D3 mortal wounds and then you get in return an extra attack. So just assuming that they would get that, and that gives them a 16 damage on an average 4-up save. Because compared to the Doomflayers versus infantry, that 20.74, that's a pretty good comparison right there. And we're cheaper. You know, we're 80 points cheaper. Yes, this is not rat ogres in the Fleshmeld Menagerie getting their +1 to attack on a 3-up roll and their 5-up horde, but that's not what we're comparing to. We're focusing in on the warpcog convocation. So what kind of melee punch you got in that list? That's why we're not giving them the additional buffs. So comparing them to a rat ogre unit, you're getting a pretty good punch. You're getting a better save. Rat ogres are 5-up save, and they're way faster. They tend to be bringing a lot more to the table for a castle-style shooting list that's just looking to just blow your opponent off the field with the rattling guns. So here's some of the weaknesses of the Doomflayer. Let's be real now. If they're not on the charge, you're going to be down 5 damage. That's just about it. You're just half damage. You're doing 1 damage per attack they get successfully through there instead of the +2 damage, or excuse me, the 2 damage. So that's going to be a downer. They can still hit pretty good, even without being on the charge. But not being infantry is also another downer, which means they can't be replaced. We can't bring them back half the unit rounding with it for a CP like you could with a rat ogre unit. And then they don't have synergies really. There's no kind of power pair hero that can pair with them to give them extra buffs. But I really think that's the point of taking them in a warpcog. They don't really need any extra buffs. Sure, you can give them the prayer for +1 to wound, and then you get them an all-out attack, and then they're dishing out like 35 damage if you do run those numbers. And then they have their random move characteristic and attack characteristic. Kind of covered that. You're moving a minimum of 5 inches. Sometimes you may end up in a position where you need them to be faster, and they may whiff on you on the attacks. But all in all, a unit that, while some of these weaknesses are difficult to stomach if you're comparing to other armies, in this particular formation, the warpcog convocation, I really think they're one of the best units for being unsupported and taking out enemy units. And what you do is with the new changes to the season rules, you make them the honor guard, because the priority targets for +1 to hit and wound that everyone was taking on Jezzails and other ranged units has been changed. So it's been weakened a little bit. While there's still an argument for putting it on the rattling guns, because you have to be within 12 inches of the target that you're shooting to be able to get that +1 to hit and wound, and it has to either be the general or the honor guard unit, not just a unit in the general's regiment. There's an argument, and this is how I would run them. I would take the Doomflayers, put them in the general's regiment, make them the honor guard, and then based off the matchup, I would give them +1 rend versus whatever the enemy's hammer unit that I think was going to be coming for my ranged units. So if we're talking Varangard or any of the cavalry units that are out there that are really hard hitting and fast, you give them +1 rend versus cavalry. So then I would keep them at the -2 rend. If you're just dealing with a really heavy infantry kind of a list, there's some Nurgle lists out there with tons of plague bearers. You just hit them with -3 at that point on the charge, so they can really do some serious damage there. And I think that's the play, is to make them the honor guard, and then you have that flexibility with each list. So here's kind of an example list, kind of put together, kind of go over warpcog convocation again, like we've been talking about. Manifestations of Doom for the Bell of Doom, really good. Really like it. Along with the Vermintide, is pretty good for tying up enemy manifestations, which is very useful, especially in this 4th edition where they're just free and everyone has them. There's an argument for the one with the pendulum and the swords and the cogs and all that, but I really still like the Bell of Doom. So you got Thanquil as the general. As always, his +1 to cast is just huge, especially with magical intervention. You can get out spells in the opponent's turn that help you kind of weather the storm of attacks. Clan Rat unit, we have our Doomflayer reinforced unit that's in the regiment for all the reasons that we just said, so we can make them honor guard and then have that flexibility for +1 Ren dependent upon the opponent. We have a unit of Night Runners, huge unit here. Their pre-game moves, pretty much what you buy them for. It's what you're paying 130 points for. They can let you move up, take seize the center, or take any objectives on the opponent's turn. And then combine that with your 3 claw steps and all the movements and shenanigans that we have in the book, and you can kind of keep them alive a little bit. And you can also sometimes screen out your opponent to where they have a really hard time getting into you. If you have like a I don't know, 12 varied guard list like my son was running not too long ago, it makes them, they hit that, you know, hey, you killed 130 points, you didn't kill my really juicy stuff. You got a plague pack here. I like the plague pack because then that gives you the option to have that +1 to wound on the Doomflayers, which then starts to unlock a little bit more damage. Also gives you the option to be able to have the Horde Breaker spell, prayer for 5 ups to mortals. And then you got regiment number 1 with the Arch Warlock. I gave him Skaven Brew because you got flexibility here. You can give the Clan Rats a little bit more teeth. You can give the Doomflayers another attack, which could really, you know, push them over the top. And then I like Short Tempered, just to get that positional advantage with the +1 to run or +1 to charge. So getting those Doomflayers in when they really need to get in there can just be priceless. Another unit of Clan Rats for good effective screening. 2 units of 6 rattling guns. They're just oppressive, man. They really are. You could, you got another 40 points. That brings you at 1960. So you can do some changing around here. But just an interesting sample list. Give it a try. In summary, we got the Doomflayer being best in the warpcog convocation for the reasons we already kind of stated. Super great unsupported unit. They don't need a bunch of buffs. They're pretty cheap, 260 points. 260 points gets you a lot of damage, especially unsupported. I mean, let's think about it. 260 points could get you 3 Storm Fiends, but the damage is just not going to be there like it's going to be there with the Doomflayers. There's an argument for taking the ones with the Grinder Fists so that you have the option to bring them down in the opponent's movement phase for positions, which is good. But the Doomflayer is also fast. We have a fast unit. I mean, that's wonderful. We haven't had a fast unit in a while. Benefits also, they benefit from the season rule change of priority targets that was being, if you had shooting units that could benefit from +1 to hit and wound, that's what you were doing. Well, now with the changes to priority targets, we got a real place for them to be able to pick up that +1 Ren and give you the flexibility you need to survive versus some of those melee threats out there. So that's my thoughts today on the Doomflayers, guys. Check them out, look into them. Tell me what you think about this video. It's a little bit different format than we usually do. Really want to get my thoughts out there. I'm loving these little models. They're great models, and they're just fun to play with on the board. And we got a game out where there's I got a unit of 4 reinforced there, and also have a Brute Terror in there. Yeah, I know he's not the greatest unit, but had to give him a try. So check that out if you want on the channel. Let me know what you think, and like and subscribe, and keep rolling those dice. Watch out for the taters.